Thank you for staying with Daybreak. We are starting the discussion right about now. We'll take a look at the dailies and then get into our main conversation of how the county assemblies have performed. And I have members of county assembly here with me. Honorable Chege Mwaura is here, Secretary General, County Assembly Forum, Nosongara MCA. Thank you for making time. Honorable Boss Mairura is here, MCA Masimba and UDA Whip in Kisii County Assembly. Thank you very much for making time. Honorable Grace Bahati, Cheleni MCA in Machakos County. Asante sana for making time. Honorable Emily Oginga, nominated MCA in Kisumu County, is joining us online, and Kevin Osido is here with us, Executive Director, County Governance Watch. So before we get into the MCA's conversation in the County Assembly, let's take a look at the dailies here. And I see in front page of the Daily Nation, IMF's bitter pill for taxpayers, no respite. Kenyans are set for another season of more tax pain as the government starts implementing International Monetary Fund-backed revenue measures that are expected to yield an additional 806 billion over the next 3 years. This comes at a time of elevated inflation and subdued economic activity, which have made it hard for Kenya Kwanza administration to bring in the new taxes and levies without opposition. And Osila, I'll start with you on this. Is this a necessary pill? It is actually a bitter pill, as the Daily Nation is saying it, but is it necessary for us at this point?
Thank you so much, Trevor, and it's good to have us here this morning. I do not think that this bill is necessary for Kenyans. And from the perspective of citizens, if you look at the degree of struggles that most families are going through, amidst the inability of government to communicate to Kenyans many things. One, where is this money? And when I say where is the money, I'm referring to really the taxes that are being picked against the services that are supposed to be delivered, ranging from issues to do with roads, to healthcare, to education, which is really as confusing as we can see, to the degree of struggles of parents, even up to this morning as we are seated here. Many children, learners still cannot go to school because of the inability of their parents to provide these safeguards, to issues that have to do with food and food security, the hunger that most families are going through. And government has honestly failed to communicate to us how much are we picking per day, what is that money doing, and what are some of these safeguards that government has put in place to be able to excite Kenyans to not only work together so that they are taxed, but also to show them where this money is. And so in as much as IMF, of course, we know that a lot of the reforms that have been put in place around the tax policy emanate from our global friends, especially the Bretton Woods institutions like IMF, World Bank, and others. But I do not think it is the responsibility of IMF to be able to remind Kenyans about how bitter the pill is. We have a government in place whose responsibility is beyond picking the taxes, is to communicate and to share with Kenyans. How much are we picking? What are we doing with this? And beyond that is the loopholes, for instance, within corruption. Yeah. What is government doing to be able to seal these loopholes? We were told, for instance, that by a very credible source, we lose 2 billion shillings a day. Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at what 2 billion shillings can do, and I'm sure that the former president, within the intelligence reports that he has, or that he had then, was relying on very credible sources to be able to make that quotation. What is the Kenya Kwanza government, the government of the day, doing to be able to seal those loopholes? And lastly, Trevor, so that my friends and colleagues could also delve into this, is to ask ourselves, has there been any research that has been done to really guarantee that we lose 2 billion shillings? It could be more, it could be less, but given the amount of money in this country, probably it is more than 2 billion shillings. So this IMF's position, I believe, is warranted based on those high-level global conversations that Kenya is having. But I do not think that this needs to be meted on Kenyans. So of course, we are the taxpayers, but our government has a much more higher responsibility to really show us a lot of the nitty-gritties of why IMF, why World Bank, and why this bitter pill.
Honorable Mairura, can Kenyans bear this tax burden at this point? Is it necessary?
Thank you, Trevor. I think what we should be discussing is whether we have a right direction in terms of improving the current situation. It might not sound bearable, but you know, the government and the president has made it very clear that we have no choice. It's high time that it takes tough decisions. As an elected leader, I am in full support because I see slowly we are adopting what we call progressive income, progressive taxation measure, whereby the higher you earn, the higher the taxes you pay. So it's a matter of time, and this is going to be fixed.
Yeah. So you say this is necessary because of the situation?
This is necessary. In leadership, you must take some tough decisions for you to fix tough matters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Grace, do you agree that this is a bitter pill that we have to take because we're in a tough situation?
Thank you, Trevor. I totally disagree. I don't know at this point whether as Kenyans we need to start dying for the government to understand that how much our Kenyans are actually suffering. Just what Mr. Osido just mentioned, currently in our wards we have students who are unable to attend school. And I'll give it a very simple statement. Most of our secondary schools are just like 1,000 Kenya shillings to keep a child in school in a month. And that is actually, and most of the parents are unable to do so. And on top of that, thank God, there's been rain. We're expecting to have a bumper harvest. But if that was not the case, then most of our Kenyans, they'll be suffering. I don't know how much we need to scream. I don't know how much we need to shout for the government to understand the Kenyans cannot bear it anymore. And just as like Mr. Osido said, it's the government has a higher responsibility to listen to its people and understand the pain that they are going through. So totally I disagree. It is not necessary. Until now we start dying. I think that's when our government will start understanding that Kenyans are not doing really well.
Okay. Shege?
Trevor, I think to start with, we're in a bad place. In running government, you either one, borrow or you raise funds. Borrowing, where we are as a country, we are at the ceiling. We can't go beyond that. At the point of now raising taxes, that's where the problem is, because you have to create a very enabling environment, good environment for people to do business, so that it's a bit lenient for people to give that tax without a lot of pressure. Because now the measures are maybe stringent and we must go through them, but raising 1 trillion shillings, 826, and 1 trillion is almost just thereabout. But then again, is the economic activity vibrant enough for us to be able to give this, and still at the same time you are left to run the economy? Because it's the economic activity that makes the country run. But if the businesses are suffering, before we went on here, you were talking about how about 9 pages of auction, people being auctioned, and all these people, I can assure you, half of them have worked with government, whether it's a county or national government. Most of them have done business, but then when it comes to be paid, they are not prioritized. So again, how are we going to raise this with that? So I think the mandarins at Treasury should be thinking of how do we, their heads should be racking, how do we ensure that the economic activity is vibrant enough to be able to support all these kind of measures, so that again, now we can raise taxes. Otherwise, we're in a hard place. It's tough, but this, the most important, the appeal that we should be talking about, other than raising taxes, is how do we ensure that the economic activity is spruced up? How do we ensure that the cost, now if you want to get a loan, Trevor, the banks are going to charge you 20% plus. You know, what business is this that you're doing that a fifth of what you're earning is going to repay loans, and then now you're left with the top up? What business is this? Treasury bills are within the same range. You know, it's about 15% now. So what is it that you're doing that gives you more than 30, so that you're left paying the banks, and then now you're left with whatever you have to run your business? So the economic activities, we are in a very tight position. So the thinking should be all sides, and everything should be towards raising revenue, yes, but also raising economic activity at the national level and even at the 47 county level, so that, I mean, county government, so that at least at every given point we are putting enough oil to the wheel so that they're able to churn more money. If the GDP doesn't grow, then of course these are the person, the mwananchi will feel the branch and the heat of it.
Emily, let me bring you in on this. The lender now, that is the IMF, wants all the tax measures in the first year of plan carried in the Finance Bill 2024. Can Kenyans bear any more taxes?
Thank you, Trevor. I just heard what my colleagues are talking about, and I'm not really in support of this high taxation because practically and realistically at the grassroots level, I just look at it from that level because, you know, as an MCA, we deal with people at the grassroots level. Life is not easy. Actually, Kenyans are in between a rock and a hard place. I think the more we are burdened with taxes, then we're actually losing out, especially on service delivery. That's number one from the government, because you find most organizations who've really been supporting the counties and on service delivery actually withdrawing because you find this taxation came in after they wrote down their proposals. So it wasn't really catered for. So that is how bad it is at the grassroots level. And also you look at currently when people were taking children to school, you know, it's actually much different from what we had last year in January. Yeah, so if you look at it deeply, then it's not really going down well with Kenyans. So I wouldn't really support it. Thank you.
All right, let's switch gears now and talk about something else that's happening here. And this is the issue around the Supreme Court, the judiciary, and the legislature and the executive. And boss, I'll start with you on this. Is there a need for dialogue between the executive and the judiciary? You've seen what has been going on.
Trevor, I think, yeah, we have been keenly following on what's going on between our judicial system and executive. And I can say without blinking that there is need for dialogue. And now that the head of state has called for the same, I think it means well. And that may end that there are a lot of squabbles that we have seen in between the two organs of government.
But why should they talk? They have this separation of powers.
you know, as much as we have separation of powers, but once we have misunderstandings, then there's need for people to come on table and iron out the issues each party is raising.
I think the concern for most people is that what are they going to talk about? Are they going to talk about the cases that are ongoing? Are they going to talk about the cases that are upcoming? Are they going to talk about their relationship? Why do they need to talk?
The main thing I have heard the president speak about is the corruption levels, that the alleged corruption levels that have been, you know, accused with the judiciary. And once the president talks, he has all the machineries to realize that those corruption have been taking place.
Yeah. And
it's in the public domain that you may hear. Let me just use a very simple example, that you have a case in court and a certain judge or a certain magistrate has been compromised to rule against your wish, as much as you told that you really wanted justice. And I think that is what the president wants to discuss. And you see some of the rulings that have been done, like now, how can you scrap out that Parliament should not proceed in, you know, discussing a certain bill that affects the whole country. The most recent about the housing levy. You know, Parliament makes laws, and the court, literally, I have not seen an article whereby the court can stop Parliament from making laws.
You can't stop them, but they interpret the laws.
Exactly.
And sometimes when they find that to be unconstitutional, they can stop.
Of course. Giving that judicial guidance is very important. And as a person, I have no problem with that. But what the head of state and other like-minded leaders have is the corruption allegations that we need to iron out.
Shege, do you agree? Is there a need for a dialogue, considering the separation of powers in the Constitution?
Trevor, you know, number one is that there's a very thin line between, first of all, there's separation of powers. Of course, laws are made in Parliament. The executive, hearing the president and the governors and all that, execute their mandates within the parameters of the law, and the judiciary interprets and gives us a balance. When we do not agree, we always go to judiciary to arbiter. Now, again, we also live in a context that we're in the same country and we can dialogue. So where does dialogue starts and ends, and where does your separation of powers starts and ends? So that's a bigger problem. But I think there's nothing wrong with dialogue so long as everybody knows their limits and everyone knows where the starting and the stopping point is. That is one. Number two, if there are issues, this new constitution is very clear on the safeguards between the executive legislature and the judiciary. If you feel that these particular issues are not going in the right direction, then there's a process. And we should be able to interpret that. Because at the end of the day, then there's a Kenyan citizen who wants to be on the table and know what you're talking about. Because nowadays, the Kenyan citizen is also amplified in terms of knowledge and in terms of expectation of the leaders that they've put in place. So the dialogue is okay. We had the national dialogue, the engagement between the executive and the opposition. And the report is out, and it's out in public domain. So again, if the executive and the judiciary and maybe parliament needs to have a discussion, let us know 1, 2, 3, 4 is the discussion points, and these are the expectations, and so that everyone, when they're sitting there, remember the Kenyan, you're expecting them to pay tax, is also is interested to know, what is this you're talking about? Is my issue the one on the table, or is something else? Yeah. So we are in a very open, the democratic space in the country is now very open and is very robust, so that now people want to be very clear on the discussion points, so that they will be not the ones on the menu. They also want to have it.
Grace, do you agree that there's need for dialogue?
I definitely don't agree. What are they going to talk about? Like you said, there is the separation of power. Yeah. And if there is the dialogue that they must have, as Kenyans, we want to know what's on the agenda of that meeting. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we'd want to know why Kome would even agree at the first place to go and sit down. First of all, as Kenyans, even if that ever happens, we want to know, is the discussion of the house levy part of it? We want to know, is the part of also the high taxation, is it also part of it? The dialogue should be a place where Kenyans, we are coming from, it's about to be, it should be relieving us, not what the executive or the judiciary, they feel like will fit their circumstances or will amplify their powers. Yeah. We want to know the agenda. If possible, we'd also want to see the dialogue even probably happen live as Kenyans. Yeah, because like I said, because there's separation of powers. So if we are going to sit down and discuss, then also all of us as Kenyans, let's be part of that dialogue. Okay. Yes.
Kevin, what do you make of this quest for dialogue? And also, we just know that the deputy president did an about-turn yesterday. He was supposed to give a petition against a judge, Esther Maina, but he said that we're giving this dialogue a chance. What does that portray? Does it mean that you have evidence, but then because there's a talk that's coming up, so let's hold on that evidence for a bit? Or what is the main agenda of this?
So it's a very interesting conversation. What I think this means, particularly from the angle of I know something about you, but I won't say until this happens. It looks like we're now setting up our institutions of governance as avenues for settling scores. And so what that means is that we are muzzling the powers of constitutional independent institutions. So that if a judge, for instance, wanted to make a judgment, and you just send a WhatsApp or a text message and say, I know what you did last night, that already changes many things, and especially when it comes to the highest office in the land, like the office of the deputy president. It's not a small office. And probably one thing I've been asking myself is whether this government has really had an opportunity to go through Gov 101 or Governance 101. Is a course that is taken in governance institutions. And I'm sure that, for instance, Kenya School of Government has some of these very good principles that our president and his deputy and the people that they work with would really benefit from, because we cannot, in my view, be setting up institutions for dialogue. These institutions are independent, which means that the way you make your decisions is not where you wait for somebody to ask you, so what are you thinking about that case? You sit, and based on the evidence that has been submitted to you, your experience and what is called jurisprudence of law, basically what is happening in other legal jurisdictions, you make your judgment based on what you know and the effects of what that judgment is going to be doing. But I think what the president and his deputy are doing is to set us up to be mumming judicial officers.
Okay.
And I don't think that therefore brings out the independence of the institutions. And the Constitution goes further also to realize that all these institutions are interdependent, which means that there are opportunities for them also to work together. But that working together is not to behave superior. Like, you know, I can close your treasury, you won't get this money. If you behave this way, we can close, you know, something about you. I don't think that is proper for a democratic state like Kenya, because Kenya is not a dictatorship.
Yeah. Okay.
We are a democratic state. The people that serve in whatever office that they sit in, they do that based on the power that Kenyans have given to them. And I want to ask His Excellency the President and his deputy to take note of that. So allow institutions to work effectively the way they have been set up to work. And if you have issues, there are mechanisms. Because even the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice, is appointed by His Excellency the President based on certain processes.
Okay.
So if he has issues with, say, the CJI, follow through that process. But don't make it look like you are disregarding all the other issues, including the very open vetting that Kenyans see our judicial officers on and all other public servants that are vetted in public going through.
Emily, close this one for us before we start the conversation on the county assembly's performance. Is there a need for dialogue between the executive and the judiciary?
Thank you, Trevor. I'm not really for the opinion of having a dialogue, because if you look at the past occurrences, you know, the executive actually has been seen in public criticizing the judiciary. And we all know that we have three arms of government. That is the judiciary, we have the legislature, and we have the executive. And previously, I feel the executive is actually trying to twist all the three arms, or the other two arms of government in the decision-making processes. Because we saw this with the legislature during the passing of the finance bill previously. And right now, the judiciary actually are being attacked because they're not really in agreement with the executive. So I don't really think there needs to be dialogue. And if there has to be dialogue, then there's a procedure for the appointment of the judiciary official of the JSC.
Okay.
So I feel then the executive, if they really need to interfere with the decisions or actually approach them for dialogue, then they need to follow that procedure.
Okay.
Then they can sit down and have a talk.
Okay.
Otherwise, with the new constitution, I think it's more of a people-driven constitution.
Yeah.
So I feel if there has to be dialogue, if there really has to be dialogue, then the people have to be really have to be roped in, and they need to know what the key points are and what the negotiation is all about.
All right.
Anyways, thank you, Trevor. That's all I have to say.
All right, I'll take a quick break now. When we come back now, we talk about your areas of special focus, the county assemblies. Have they performed as per expectation? I see here the Controller of Budget, Dr. Margaret Nyakango, raising a red flag, seeking to stop what she termed as unnecessary foreign and local travel. Shege Mwaura's county, Nairobi County MCAs have flashed 8.9 million on the skies on foreign travel in just 3 months. We'll talk about that in just a bit. Have you performed according to expectation? Have the MCAs performed according to expectations? At Trevor Mbija, at Citizen TV Kenya, use the hashtag Daybreak. We're back with that discussion in just a bit.